Hello and welcome back to another video. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the legendary quest. Essentially I was sort of chatting with Az on Twitter for a little bit, and then I went off on a giant tangent on my own just about, design ideas for legendary things. And, well, I think there's actually a few good points to make about how legendary quests are handled in World of Warcraft. Now, I've actually recorded this video one time before, but I kind of left all the main points to the very end of the video, which in hindsight was a bit dumb, so I'm going to open up with what I think would be a pretty nifty way of doing things, and I'll explain after, so just hold off on the ragey comments. So, in light of seeing how things have worked out in Warlords of Draenor so far, especially with the earlier stages of the legendary quest, which I thoroughly think were very enjoyable, this is what I would ideally like it to be. So first of all, no Arbigator Stones, no Mogu Runes of Fate, no magical spiced falafel. I don't want any of those items. Essentially what those items serve to do is gate your time, and I'll get on to why I don't like that in a bit, but I think that instead of doing that, they should take a bit of a leaf from their own book with the idea of collecting some sort of item from the end wing boss of the raid. So, for an example, maybe the instead of getting Arbigator Stones, you would have to collect an item from each of the main bosses of Highmall, for an example. And those items would be a 100% drop rate. But you're probably thinking, hang on a second, that means that someone could get through the legendary quest in 1 week. Worry not, that's not what I would do. I would, at the same time, I'd still have time gating, but it would be in the form of cool quests that are fun, that involve you and Khadgar going out, doing some shenanigans, and really just truly cool stuff. You know, full voice-acted quests with lots of mechanics. You know, the kind of stuff that Blizzard can pull off when they're really trying with a quest. Like, for an example, some of the really interesting patch 6.1 quests. How about something like that? Now, the reason why I think all of this is because right now the legendary quest has got a few cool parts. For an example, the fight with Kairos Dormu, and the bit with, well, I'm not going to spoil it actually, the bit after the Arbigator Stone collection. Those things are cool, but it's only really 2 stages, and we only get a few stages per entire expansion legendary based on what happened in MoP. So I think it would be pretty cool if maybe instead of us spending 6 weeks beholden to the annoying RNG of Arbigator Stones and the overall gaminess of that, just collecting arbitrary items, how about it's just time-gated via weekly quests, which are tied into our progress. I think that makes a lot more sense to the player. If you think about the sort of fantasy of it all, which I think is a really important thing to really take into account when you're designing something like this. You meet up with Khadgar, and Khadgar says, right, listen, we've got some stuff to do on our own, and then you need to go into Highmall. Now, it makes sense that you go into Highmall, you kill all the big bad guys, and then you go back to Khadgar, and you just do some quests and things, and once both of those are done, once Khadgar's done all his stuff, and you've done all your stuff by collecting the things from Highmall, then you go to the final stage, which I would have to be essentially a large boss fight that is solo, so something like Canrathad, or the Kairos fight, or perhaps the trial of the various Celestials in Pandaria, something like that, but a lot harder. So overall, what this system does is that it would gate your time a little bit more naturally, instead of just, going to a boss and thinking, oh, I wonder how many Arbigator Stones it'll drop, because look, that's not fun. Instead of doing that, you go and do a cool quest every week. That's a bit of new content that's fun, that's interesting, that's actually something to look forward to. Is your 4th time through Highmall LFR to get Arbigator Stones really made more fun by the fact that you get Arbigator Stones? Is that really a new experience to the 3rd time you did it? No! Have a weekly quest, you get a new experience, a new thing, and Blizzard still accomplishes their goal of ensuring that not everyone nabs themselves a legendary item or a very high item level epic within the first week of the legendary quest being out. Overall, with this, it would feel a little bit more like you're going out and doing a series of bespoke tasks, because nothing would really be the same. During those 5 weeks, every quest would obviously be different, or maybe 6 weeks, I'm just saying a random number, whatever. During however many weeks, every quest that you get is unique, and it's specifically tailored, so it's a really nice, fun bit of cool content. That stuff's unique, and then going in to a raid, and killing those end-of-wing bosses, and then maybe the end boss, that's a kind of task that you're going and doing. If we go back to the very start of the legendary quest in this expansion, it felt like a series of unique tasks. Khadgar said, hey, you need to get this Solarian band. so go to Skyreach and get it. Then he said, hey, let's go grab these items from the dungeons. You went and you did that, and then you fought a big cool thingy at the end. That just felt like you sort of participating in this epic quest. Whereas, you know, however many weeks of go in, clear High Mall every week, collect some Arbigator stones, it just feels very arbitrary and gamey, and this brings me on to the point of, well, game systems feeling too gamey and that just not being very compelling for people. I don't get enthused by the idea of increasing my number of Arbigator stones from 66 to 72. That's just not really fun, but what I do get excited by is getting to do a new quest with some cool voice acting and some cool new lore or something like that in it. Both of those things have still got the same effect in terms of they gate my time because I can only do one quest a week, but one of them gates your time in a way that actually gives you new content that's cool and interesting rather than just one that makes you repeat the same stuff. I don't know if this is the right word, but I think it conveys the right meaning, and basically a system like that would be a bit more holistic to the player rather than arbitrary and gamey. I think that's the right way of saying it, but I don't know, and if you know more about English than me, which is completely very probable actually, do let me know what the correct word is down in the comments. Now, there is one thing that's perhaps kind of controversial to talk about, and that's the idea of the reward and then also difficulty levels. This is probably going to be the more controversial bit of the video, but just keep in mind that no matter what, I would like it for everyone, that's including the LFR people, absolutely everyone, to get rewards and get to see the actual story. That I'm cool with. So what I would probably do is have it so that the very final stage of the quests that involve you collecting items from the, you know, wing bosses or end bosses of a raid, and the final stage of those would obviously be collecting the big item from the final baddie of the raid, which makes sense. I would have it so that that item actually has got a quality to it. So essentially, you could get the LFR quality item, the normal quality one, the heroic one, or the mythic one. And then perhaps, like it is currently with the tier gear, the LFR, you know, end item maybe wouldn't have one or two bells or whistles. Maybe it would have a different kind of proc that's, okay, just a little bit more pedestrian, but in reality, if you look at how LFR is designed in Warlords of Draenor, it is definitely more about seeing the content rather than getting the crazy big rewards, because you can get LFR quality gear from so many other sources. I think that would be a decent enough way of doing things that would definitely fit into the current game. It would mean that everyone could see the lore, everyone could experience those weekly quests, but the highest quality rewards would go to the players who do the hardest content. Like, I'll be frank, I don't want a mythic item that, or a legendary item that's got infinity item levels that really should go to only mythic players, because I don't deserve it, because I only do normals and heroics. Now, I suppose for the final legendary item of the expansion, maybe they could just make some sort of concession and have it only be an item level difference. I'm not sure how that really would play out, and honestly, because any quest legendaries are more than likely not going to be a massive thing in terms of their transmog appearance, I don't think it would matter that much. One of the reasons why they actually chose a legendary ring is because it wouldn't mess up with the appearance of people's characters. I just want to put it out there, though, that I really hope that the legendary rings, you know, whatever, like, cool shiny effect they put on it can be, like, somehow disabled or enchanted over or just something like that, because having my cloak, you know, pop up with its big blue thingy for a year solid was a little bit annoying at times, though I will admit it was cool for the first 15 minutes. Now, another point about a difficulty system like that is that, you know, after you complete the legendary quest, if you were to then go back into the raid and kill it on a higher difficulty, you could still get that higher difficulty end boss item from the final boss, and then you could maybe hand that in and pay some gold or whatever and swap it for the higher item level version of what you currently have. I think that might make sense. And also, do bear in mind that in Warlords of Draenor, completing things in normal mode is far more accessible than it ever has been, and because of the in-game group finder. So if maybe you're not traditionally someone who did that much in terms of organized raiding, it's totally an open option. I remember back in Wrath of the Lich King, there was basically a period of time where I wasn't really raiding with my guild, where I was just kind of new, you know, I didn't really want to jump in immediately. But I still pugged some stuff in ICC, and despite being a complete noob and being young and all that, it still worked out pretty decently, actually. Now, another thing to mention is the harder end fight on an individual basis that I talked about earlier. So something like the Celestial Trials or the Kairos Dormu fight. I think they should do those again, keep on doing them, but the end ones that give you the cool item at the end should be way harder than they currently are. And I really do mean a good bit harder. Maybe not as difficult as Canrathad, because I don't think they would be able to design a well-balanced Canrathad fight that would fit every class. Of course, do remember, Canrathad was specifically, it's the Greenfire quest, by the way, and it was specifically designed around the toolkit of Warlocks. So obviously you couldn't make a fight like that for every single class, or that, you know, would apply to every class. But still, I'd say that they should have something that's a bit harder, both in terms of mechanics, but also just the raw numbers. I think that's totally fine. And I hope that the idea of killing the super hard thing and then getting a cool reward is not dead, because that's fun and it feels quite rewarding. Also, things like, say, the difficulty of Canrathad were very well received, and I think that in a situation like this, when there really is some important stuff on the line, difficulty is okay to have. It's the legendary quest, remember. You should feel like a legend when you move your way through it. Now, of course, it would probably be balanced to the stage where someone in mythic gear could obviously face roll their way through it, but for the average LFR or normal player, it would take just a decent amount of attempts, and you would have to pay attention to mechanics quite reasonably, or at least more than in the previous ones. Really, I suppose something like the Kairos fight with one or two more mechanics and a little bit more numerical difficulty would work just fine. I really do love it though when Blizzard go all out trying to design a solo fight like that, and I hope we see more of that in the future. And I think that's really most of what I want to talk about covered. Of course, this is just me throwing ideas out there, so if you do have any ideas of your own for ways to improve the Legendary Quest, absolutely throw them into the comments and I'll have a good read of them. I think that this video was really just spurred off me thinking about Arbigator Stones and Moga Runes of Fate and Secrets of the Empire and the new, is it Elemental Flux or something, whatever the next thing is from Blackrock Foundry, and just getting a little bit sort of peeved at it all. I was just thinking, oh, this is so gamey, you know, this doesn't feel compelling, it doesn't feel like a unique thing to challenge, or, you know, to collect, it doesn't feel like a challenge, it just feels like a boring grind, and if they are going to gate our time that way, damn it, they could do it in a more interesting way. And also another thing is popping into my head, and that is Fragments of Valinir, and some of the older legendaries did have item grinds, I suppose a little bit similar to what we had, where, you know, you'd need to get Fragments of Valinir and ensure they went to the right person in your raid to get the legendary from Ulduar. But here's what I'd say about that, and about the older way of doing some of those legendaries. Those items were never considered something in the reach of every single player. It was something that was tackled on a guild level basis, like the whole guild would be trying to get their priest with a Valinir because that's pretty awesome, and it helps everyone out. And even though the progression with that might be kind of slow, at least it's shared between the whole guild, and you're going to be there anyway doing other things. The fact that not everyone is expected to have one of them, I think really does matter though, because it then feels a bit more optional, like a sort of cool perk that everyone can have. But if we're in a state like with the current legendaries, where everyone is sort of expected to have their I don't mean specifically legendaries, just, you know, high item level quest thingy, like say the Solarian Band that we currently have, everyone's expected to have one of those, so everyone is expected to do that item grind, and because it's done on an individual basis, it's not a part of a larger guild progression that you can all get sort of invested in, and really there's a feeling of camaraderie there when you're all getting together to help out one of the people in your guild. That's awesome, that's cool, it's memorable. But when that's there on an individual basis in a different system where everyone is expected to have the item, maybe Blizzard just sort of transplanted some of the ideas from that older system without maybe taking into account one or two things. I guess while I am happy that they learned loads of lessons from the Mists of Pandaria legendary quest, I may be a little bit sad that they didn't think of a better way of gating our time than what they actually did. And I think that ultimately what I'm saying here, and the essence of my point, is that if Blizzard are going to gate our time, then I understand why. It's an MMO, that's just a part of MMO design. But you can gate people's time in a way that leads to RNG frustration, time wasting, and doesn't really add any value to the player's experience in terms of their enjoyment. Or you can gate content in a way that actually gives people a really cool thing every week that they can go and they can enjoy. Overall, the same thing is accomplished. It takes X amount of weeks for someone to get their legendary item. But what's different is that via one path, people can actually have a lot more fun. And I think that's overall a better way to design it. Anyway, that's really enough for me. Please let me know what you think about A, this, and B, legendaries in general. Actually, here's a good question. If there is going to be a traditional raid legendary in Warlords of Draenor, how would you like it done? I'm really keen to see what people's ideas are for that. Anyway, that's really it for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.